guys, it's your boy Luke here for our DFS value picks for this week's RBC Heritage. In this video, we'll be covering my top 6 plays for GPP contests priced $7,500 and below to help try and get some leverage on the field and of course open up some of that salary to spend up for an extra stud or two up top. Last week's picks for the Masters up top, we're a little bit shaky, but with our value picks, we were absolutely spot on. We identified guys like Charles Schwartzel, Cameron Champ, and Kevin Na as values, and all three ended up being the top 3 values on the board for the Masters. So of course, looking to build on that type of momentum, because if you can hit on your guys down low, it makes it much easier to take down contests with those studs up top. So that's what we're going to touch on here. Let's go ahead and hop right on into it. Alright guys, on the screen you can see our projections for this week, and as always, if you're looking for access to these spreadsheets, make sure to check out my Patreon page, just $8 for the month, and as per usual, a link is in the description to go ahead and join. But let's touch on our first value pick, which is going to be Russell Knox at $7,300. He was coming in with really scorching form, particularly in the last month and a half, but it's kind of cooled down of late. If we take a look at the recent form, you'll see what I'm talking about here. Russell Knox finished 61st at the Valero, which was disappointing based on the recent form that he had. 57th at the Valspar, 6th place at the Players. That's really where we started to get excited about Russell Knox. We were able to take advantage of him at the Players Championship, and before that, it was a top 25 after top 25. He had really been in that consistent run of golf, and even despite not having his best stuff the last 2 times out, particularly over the weekend where he started to bleed strokes, you can see why I'm so excited to play him. He's gaining a ton of strokes on approach. He has been for right around the last 3 to 4 months. In fact, earlier than 2-3 weeks ago, it was closer to a stroke gain per round. So you can see those 2 performances where he finished right around 50th or 60th have kind of hurt that category there, but still gaining off the tee around the green. He's right around neutral. That is going to be the case for pretty much his entire career, and it's going to come down to the putter. I've said this multiple times this year, and I'm going to stand by it. When Russell Knox can go out there and gain 3 or 4 strokes to the field with the flat stick, he's going to win. And even at this type of event where you do have a lot of the studs, that's 10 of the top 20 in the official World Golf Rankings, he's more than capable of winning an event because his ball striking is that solid. So I will be taking him here. We've seen plenty of long shot winners win the RBC Heritage over the years, and this week specifically, Russell Knox is that long shot I'm probably adding to my betting card. So do like him in the outright market, but even more specifically here for the DFS market, where I would expect him to be relatively low owned after those 2 disappointing performances over his last 2 starts. And also, I just think he's being a little bit slept on, right? A lot of the other people in this range, people are going to be wanting to go to a JJ Spawn a whole lot. Troy Merritt should be extremely popular this week. I mentioned Kevin Streelman before, but he's going to be twice, maybe even 3 times more chalky than somebody like a Russell Knox. And must we forget that just 2-3 weeks ago, Russell Knox was chalk. He hit as chalk at the Players Championship, and now people want to abandon the guy after 2 made cuts, right? It's not like the guy went out there and missed cuts or anything like that. He's still more than adequate, and at $7,300, I don't want to say that a made cut is enough to pay it off, but you're getting pretty close, right? If he finishes top 25, that's probably all we're looking for from somebody like a Russell Knox, and I certainly think that he has a lot higher upside than just that. The next value I want to touch on is going to be Cameron Tringale at $7,000, and every time that name comes out of my mouth, I want to puke a little bit just because he's not the most sexy play. Pretty much every time you play Tringale, the volatility that you're getting. He's either going to go out there, finish in the top 10, or very likely trunk slamming, finishing like plus 10 or plus 15. He usually has no in between, an extremely volatile player, and of late, it has not been good for Tringale. So if we take a look at some of the recent finishes for him, you'll see exactly why people are steering clear. The match play couldn't even get out of his group play, finished almost dead last. The Valspar Championship hardly made the cut, really fell apart over the weekend, missed cut at the Players, missed cut at the API, and before that, it was even more missed cuts. This guy's been on a really bad stretch of golf, but despite that, the shots gain metrics haven't looked that bad, and that's why I'm willing to forgive and forget here. The off the tee play is always going to be an issue for Tringale. He's not very long off the tee, but is relatively accurate, which at this golf course, specifically Harbour Town Golf Links, that's exactly what we're looking for. If you take a look at my key stats, we're not going to do a whole deep dive here. The one glaring missing item here is driving distance, and that's because it's almost non-existent here. You're just looking for guys that are accurate off the tee. So for somebody like Tringale, who that's his main bugaboo, that gives him a huge boost in my modeling. Around the green is always pretty solid for Tringale. The one surprising part of his game has been the putting. He has not been able to do anything with the flat stick. And for Tringale, he's going to have the putter to go out there and have a solid performance. If we take a look at the last 50 measured rounds, which again, still hasn't been the best stretch of golf for Tringale. He's right around the same with the approach play. Around the green is still there. A little bit less negative with the off the tee play, but the putter right around a neutral. And that's the key for Tringale. If he's right around a neutral, that means that he's going out there having spike performances from time to time where he's gaining 3-4 strokes with the putter. And of course, in the opposite end of the volatility, right? He's going to have a few bad performances. That's just based on how aggressive that he is and the type of streaky player that Tringale can be. So he's certainly a risky play, but like I said, these are catered towards large field GPP tournaments. This isn't like a cash lock or somebody that I'm locking into my main single entry lineup, but in a large field player pool where I'm playing 45, 50 players out of my 150 lineups, he's going to be somebody I have in the 10, maybe even 15% exposure range. He just has that type of upside. You can see the long-term modeling is very advantageous for him. You see he's number 35 in the field in terms of his course fit at Harbour Town. So somebody I'm willing to forgive for some of his recent struggles, particularly because the approach play has still been there, right? And that's the most sticky stack from week to week. Off the tee play, we can kind of ignore this week. Just has to flip that putter. And for a value pick at $7,000, that isn't all too much to ask for. Next up, we have Joel Dahmen at $6,800. So he's at the same price as Lanto Griffin, who I also love this week. But Joel Dahmen, much like a Lanto Griffin, a very similar skill set. Relatively short off the tee, so also like a Cameron Tringale there. Doesn't have to worry about that this week. Makes a lot of his shots gained with the approach play, and the putter can get hot from time to time. So very similar skill set there. Not a surprise that both of them are going to be in the player pool. If we take a look at the last 50 measured rounds for somebody like Joel Dahmen, you can see he's gaining off the tee. A majority of that is with his accuracy. He's one of the most accurate drivers on the PGA Tour. The approach play is always a consistent gainer for Joel Dahmen. That's really where he makes his hay to the field. Around the green's never solid. That's also something you can get away with at this golf course. It's nice to be good around the green. We have seen a little bit of correlation with around the green success to success at the RBC Heritage, but relatively slow greens, running at right around 11 and a half on the stimp meter. And you're also dealing with not very much undulation. So in general, the around the green shots here aren't very difficult. They're what you would see at a Muni golf course, to be honest with you, as compared to what we saw at Augusta National, where if you're missing greens, it is a huge penalty. Getting up and down is pretty much a 50-50 proposition at the very best. So it's not that type of golf course. You can get away with that. And the putter, much like a Cameron Tringale, is always going to be inconsistent. It's always the X factor for Joel Dahmen. But keep in mind, these are value picks, right? These are for large field tournaments. You want that upside because when he brings that putter to the table, he is legit top 15, top 10, or even winning upside in this field. So in these large field tournaments, he's one of the higher upside plays that I see myself going to. But much like a Cameron Tringale, he's much too volatile for single entries or even for your main cash lineup. Just again, he has to bring that putter to the table to really find that success. But if he does, you certainly want to be there for these large field tournaments. Next up, we have Nick Taylor at $6,600. He's somebody who's extremely accurate off the tee, so very similar to somebody like a Joel Dahmen. Very solid with the approach play, one of the most consistent gainers on approach that you'll find here on the PGA Tour, but even more so than a Tringale and a Joel Dahmen. The consistency that he has with the with the approach play is more than lost with the putter. I mean, he's one of the most inconsistent putters on the PGA Tour. So if we go down here, take a look at some of the recent shots gained metrics for him down here at $6,600. You'll see that he's gaining slightly off the tee. Again, a majority of that due to his accuracy. He's not very long off the tee. Gaining on approach, close to a third of a stroke per round, which is actually a little bit low for Nick Taylor. He's usually a little bit better than that. And losing a ton of strokes with the putter. So he's consistently bad with the putter, might be a better way to put it. If we go down to the last 50 measured rounds, you'll see it's relatively consistent, right? Losing with the putter. Round neutral with all three of these shots gain categories. But the real thing is that he's trending upwards, right? The approach play has been there. He's starting to hit a ton of greens in regulation. If we take a look at the recent form, you'll see that that has been reflected in his results. He's been much more consistent of late. So rather than missing a ton of cuts, he did have the missed cut at the Valero, but made the cut at the Valspar, also made the cut at the API. Made the cut at the Honda Classic, a few other tournaments down there in Florida. So it's just been a little bit more consistent of late than what we've seen over the long term. And he's won at tournaments like this, at tournaments where you don't have to be very long off the tee. It's usually about accuracy and approach play. Those are the tournaments where Nick Taylor has found success historically. So I like the price tag at $6,600. I think he should be priced closer to maybe $7,000 or even $7,100. And I also expect him to be relatively low owned. Coming in off that missed cut, I think a lot of people will be hesitant to get to him. So you might only be in that 3 to 4% owned range. It means if we get 8 to 10% ownership on him in our set of 150, we're going to have plenty of leverage to the field. So another high upside play that I like that really needs to bring the putter to the table this week to make a significant impact. Our next pick is going to be Adam Svensson at $6,400. So now we're really getting to the bottom of the board. Some of these guys that are extremely cheap, but of course are going to give us a ton of flexibility. I like the iron play. I mean, he was a hot topic down there in the Florida swing, down there at the Honda Classic, was near chalk, and you can see why. He's gaining off the tee, gaining on approach. He's always been relatively cheap. Around the green's never going to be a strong suit for him. You know, he's a young player, has plenty of time to grow into that type of skill set. But much like these other value picks, he just has to bring the putter to the table. And if you can't tell, this week that's what I'm trying to bet on, right? Guys that can flip that hot putter, that can do it in all the other categories that I'm looking for. That is a much more reasonable path to success than perhaps somebody like a Zach Johnson, right, who's not gaining on approach. He has to flip the approach play, which is by far the hardest part of your game to flip week to week. It's the most sticky stat from week to week. That is shots gained approach that I'm talking about. Whereas putting is extremely volatile. You'll have guys that are losing from week to week with the flat stick that then go out there and gain 4 or 5 strokes to the field in any given week. So it's just statistically much more likely to happen than somebody like Zach Johnson flipping it with the ball striking. And Adam Svensson has also been a pop player. If we take a look over the last 50 measured rounds, give him a little bit of a larger sample size, you can see he's still gaining with the ball striking, even more significantly with the approach play, which is nice to see. And the putter still right around a third of a stroke lost per round. So he's more often than not going to hit, but that's why he's $6,400. That's why he's going to be maybe 2-3% owned this week. So just make sure to keep that in perspective, guys, with some of these people down low. You're really looking for any of a chance for them to get to that ceiling performance, any type of a pathway at all, rather than trying to just eliminate guys, right? If you're just trying to find reasons to fade people down low, you're going to find yourself fading everyone, because all of these plays down here, particularly when they're $6,000 or even $6,500 and below, all are going to have faults, right? I mean, Adam Long, horrible putter. Zach Johnson, horrible with the ball striking. Michael Thompson, just really kind of bad across the board. You're not going to find those sexy picks. So for me, I'm trying to narrow down on these ball strikers, the guys that we've seen that upside from before, and Adam Svensson certainly fits that build. Now, lastly, our pure flyer pick when it comes to our values this week is going to be Luke Donald at $6,300. And admittedly, I almost made him a core pick this week. That's how much I like him down here at $6,300, almost there at the bare minimum. In terms of a Harbour Town fit, you can see he's number 7 in the field. And a lot of that is due to the approach play. If you just take a look at his shots gained profile, you'll see exactly why I want to play him. He's gaining over 3/4 of a stroke per round with the off the tee play. Sorry, with the approach play. With the off the tee play, he's losing nearly half a stroke per round, which of course is not ideal. He's one of the shortest hitters on the PGA Tour at this point, but at this golf course specifically, as I've touched on multiple times this week, distance off the tee isn't a factor. You're going to be laying up a lot. He's very accurate with that 3-wood, still extremely accurate off the tee, but that doesn't lead you to gaining strokes to the field. So I absolutely love him there at $6,300. The putting in the around the green play hasn't really been lost, and if we zoom out just to make sure this isn't just a recent trend, it isn't. He's still gaining actually even more with the approach play, closer to a stroke gained per round. The off the tee play gets a little bit worse, which is, you would expect that, right? He's not the best off the tee player, but he's gaining around the green. The putter is still right around a neutral. So if this week he can go out there, continue to do his thing, hitting a ton of fairways in regulation, can continue to lean into that approach play, which is one of the best in the entire field, not just for these guys down here in the value range, can perhaps get a spike putter. He could perhaps top 5 at this event. That's completely in the realm of possibility. I know he's getting up there in age, but with the de-emphasis on and off the tee play, especially with that distance, this is one of the few events where he can actually compete. Now, if we take a look at the course history, it is not ideal, right? You would expect him to have some success here, given that he is such a good course fit, but miscut 2 times in a row. He did make the cut there in 2019, miscut in 2018, but second in 2017. So we have seen that upside, right? We've seen the positive end of that volatility. So much like some of the other value picks here, he is far from a sure prospect, far from a lock to go out there and finish in the top 10, but certainly has that type of upside in his range of possibilities. That's all I've got for this week's value picks. Before we go on and get out of here, go ahead and let me know down in the comments what your favorite value on the board is. Just make sure he's priced $7,500 and below on Draftkings. But I would love to hear from you guys, and let me know who you're going to for some of that salary flexibility. I appreciate all of your support here. If you haven't already hit that like button, make sure you go ahead and do so. It helps with getting it out there to even more people, and helps me grow the channel, which I appreciate a whole ton, guys. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel if you haven't already as well. That way you don't miss any of the content I'm dropping in the future, whether it's our fades and sleepers, which should be coming out a little bit later on tonight. The rest of our DFS content, including our live stream, showdown content, prize picks, cards, all that sort of fun stuff. You won't want to miss any of that to come. Best of luck with all of your lineups this week. Of course, if there's any questions that you have or any value picks perhaps you want my 2 cents on, feel free to go ahead and comment those down below. I appreciate you guys. Let's get this cash this week and perhaps let's take down one of these tournaments.